Welcome to Gonzaga Nation SI, the Gonzaga Nation Media Network. Adam Morrison not feeling the best this week, so we brought in a pinch hitter. He is a frequent on the Sack and Jack podcast that we also host on the Gonzaga Nation Media Network. Producer extraordinaire, Christian Pedersen. He's going to take it over, lead me into some questions. I have an idea of what they are. I don't know 100% what they are. So, Christian, take it over.
Dan, thank you very much for having me on. And I do appreciate actually being able to talk about basketball and not whatever the hell Rob and Jack get up to on a Tuesday morning. I'll say this, man. Also, I'm probably going to do a little bit more passing of the ball than Adam Morrison would ever have conceived of in his entire life. So, yeah, let's see how we do together. I'm curious, man. We are at it is New Year's, so we are technically at a turning point. This feels like a good time to pepper you with some questions about how you think the non-conference went and how you think the conference play is going to go for Gonzaga. All season long, I have seen Sack and Jack ride this crazy emotional roller coaster. The season is over. The season is saved.
I'm not surprised with either one of those guys. Rob's a little bit more even keel than Jack, though. That's for sure.
But that's how emotional this season has been, is that if it can even get Rob Sacre to feel both ends of the spectrum, I'm even a little confused. So glad we have you here to help sort this all out. I'm curious, going into the WCC season, who do you think has performed both the best, maybe I don't want to necessarily the worst, but the most surprisingly? Give out some of your highs and your lows of the WCC's non-conferences performances.
So I think there's one team in particular that is still a head scratcher to me. They've shown unbelievable highs and they've also showed some lows, and that's University of Portland. They lost to open WCC play last night to LMU. But they played the PK 85 in Portland over Thanksgiving time, and they took North Carolina to the wire. They took Michigan State to the wire. They beat Villanova, but they haven't been able to consistently win games, which is obviously, what you need to do. So they've got talent. They've shown they can compete. I think they just need to finalize and execute some of those game plans to come out on top. I think the team that has been consistently a surprise throughout the year is Santa Clara. They were 12-3 going into conference play. They've got some really good wins. They finished their non-conference with a good win against Boise State at home before Christmas. And, I think Herb Sendek is on the verge of maybe getting Santa Clara back in the NCAA tournament. Now, I know it's a stretch because they have to play well in the conference, but he's gotten 3 teams in the NCAA tournament before. Miami of Ohio, North Carolina State, Arizona State. He's looking to try to get a 4th team there. But he was great in the transfer portal. They got a wing, Brandon Pozminski. I've heard it pronounced a few different ways, so I apologize if I am messing that up. I will get clarification before I call the game with Greg and Richard on Saturday down there. But he's been a tremendous scorer, transfer from Illinois, averaging he's hovered around the 20-point mark throughout this season. So I think the big surprise is Santa Clara.
So you say the team-wise surprises. Have there been any individual players that have maybe become, the unprecedented superstars, or you're like, hey, that guy alone could be a difference maker for the whole conference because of a domino effect? They get one win there, sure, type thing. Or even just on Gonzaga, we know Drew Timme, but there's been having some new names that have had to step up into the spotlight this year.
Yeah, obviously to stay away from Gonzaga, everybody knows the year Drew Timme's having. So that would be an easy one to say standout performer. Maxwell Lewis with Pepperdine has made some big strides in year 2 as a sophomore. I think, honestly, he's the best NBA prospect in the league. Now, if he leaves this year, do I think it's a mistake? I still think he needs to work on his skill set and improve to become a guy who can last and have a truly good pro career. But there's a buzz around him and his game right now based on his improvement. Pepperdine hasn't played maybe record-wise what you would have thought based on their talent level with the returning group of sophomores and a nice talented freshman in Javon Porter. So, I think player-wise, to be a surprise, Maxwell Lewis, Pozminski with Santa Clara, who I mentioned. The other one that I really think's been great for their individual program and the league is Tyrell Roberts at San Francisco. Transfer from Washington State. He's kind of been, you knew Khalil Shabazz was going to be the main guy with the ball in his hands after Bouye left. And so Shabazz has kind of taken Bouye's role to a certain extent from last year. Tyrell Roberts has kind of filled into the role of Khalil Shabazz last season. Hit a game winner against previously unbeaten UNLV a couple weeks back. So I think those guys have been pleasant surprises.
In a lot of our early shows this season, you mentioned that you feel like this has been a year where the WCC has elevated just even its base level of play. So are we looking at a 3 or 4 teams going to make it into the tournament, or is this going to be a lot of friendly fire? Is Gonzaga in they got a nice clear path because of that friendly fire, or are they in danger this year? Maybe my question is, like, where is your stress level going into WCC, or just, how messy is this whole thing going to get in January and February?
Yeah, I think Gonzaga has again done what they've done the last few years, is distance themselves from the rest of the league. I do think St. Mary's is very good, but I think Gonzaga is better. I think you're looking at 2 clear-cut NCAA tournament teams in Gonzaga and St. Mary's. Then I think you're looking at, if all goes well, you could get a 3rd team into the NCAA tournament this year. Is that San Francisco again? Is that Santa Clara? Because those are the 2 teams that I see as being right there, based on, what they've done in the non-conference. But if you then look at BYU's looked really good at times. Unfortunately, they've looked really bad at times. LMU is already in double-digit wins, where it took them darn near the whole entire season a year ago to get to double-figure wins. So they're a team that, can they break into number 3? I don't think so, but they've performed. I think if you're looking at overall records, Portland's been a little bit of a disappointment after playing well early. And then Pacific is the only team that really has a poor non-conference record. You could say, I guess you could put Pepperdine into that grouping as well, but Pepperdine, I think, has the talent. If they figure things out and put it together, they could still challenge for a top half of the league finish.
So what I'm hearing is, overall, you still believe that the WCC has elevated their play. There's a couple of breakout players for people to watch. What are people maybe not paying attention to right now that they need to pay attention to in the WCC?
Yeah, I think what people aren't talking enough about is that 3 through 7 and 8 range of teams, I think, are really good. I think 9 and 10 are going to be Pacific and San Diego. Right now, Pepperdine is in that 8, 9, 10 mix because they haven't performed in the win-loss column, but I think their talent can elevate them up. So if you put Pepperdine in that 8, 9, 10 mix, you're looking at 3 through 7. I think there's a lot of parity, and I think you're going to see a lot of dogfights. I think LMU, after year 1 in Stan Johnson of having a nice run, year 2 was a disappointment. A lot of that was due to injuries. Some of it was due to COVID game pauses, and then they couldn't regain their rhythm that they had at times this season ago. So I think the biggest thing people aren't looking out for is just how competitive 3 through 7 in the league is going to be this year.
All right, Dan, I will close out on this. And I know that you hate when I try to do the producer role and feed you soundbitey questions, but if you had to make a New Year's resolution for Gonzaga basketball, or just for the WCC in general, but we know people are here for the ZAG information, what would that New Year's resolution be?
I think for the WCC, it's teams that are, again, in that 3 through 7 grouping that I mentioned have to protect home court. And by that, I mean, if a team in that grouping of 3 through 7 really thinks they can make a run to get that 3rd place spot, maybe challenge for 2nd, you got to beat a St. Mary's or a Gonzaga at home. You can't let that opportunity slide. More difficult to do than said, obviously. And then on the flip side, you can't lose to Pacific or San Diego, who are looking like the bottom 2 teams in the league this year. You can't lose to any of those at home. If you do, I think you're kind of big time shooting yourself in the foot, and taking away any opportunities to really gain momentum and get into those top positions of the league, of the upper tier. For Gonzaga, I think if there was a WCC New Year's resolution, it would be, don't change anything. I think a lot of the fan base was worked up early in regards to having 3 losses. And again, if you look at it, Gonzaga hasn't had 3 losses in the season at that point of the year in probably 12, 15 years. I mean, it's taken deep into February and sometimes March lately to have 3 losses. And so people were talking about the sky is falling, what's going on, what's wrong. There was nothing wrong. It was a talented group of returners in new roles outside of Drew Timme. Everyone was really in a new role. Well, maybe Anton Watson and Rasir Bolton weren't in new roles, but they were in more responsible roles where the outcomes were dictated by what they were doing. But then you had Nolan Hickman, you had Hunter Salas, you had Malachi Smith, you had, on down the list, guys having to figure out new roles and responsibilities and be up to the challenge. So I think the big thing would be just stay the course with Gonzaga. Don't change anything, because if you look at the gauntlet of schedule that they played, it was ridiculous. I think now that some of the bigger Power 5 teams are getting into conference play, their numbers have elevated as far as strength of schedule. But at one point, Gonzaga was battling it out 1 or 2 for strength of schedule across the country. So, what they did in the non-conference has absolutely prepared them for everything they're going to see in the conference. And I don't think Gonzaga needs to change anything.
It certainly is crazy to think that current Gonzaga students would have been, second through like fourth graders the last time the team had this many losses going into WCC conference, man. Certainly we are blessed with an abundance of success here in Gonzaga. Dan, that's all the questions I had for you. Pepperdine today. The schedule starts up, there's winter break is over. They have had their 5 days off for Christmas. It's time to get back to the basketball. You are going to go call games. There's plenty to go around all day, every day here in Gonzaga Nation. Anything else the folks need to know before we say goodbye?
Yeah, we're going to be churning out a ton of content on the website. We've got a couple great journalists, and Cole Forsman, Henry Kruger, who are just knocking it out of the park with a lot of great articles. Photographers that we've got at nearly every game, giving you a unique look at Gonzaga basketball, and then the podcast slate, both what I've got with the ISO with opposing coaches, what Adam and I do with Gonzaga Nation SI, what Stephanie Hawk Freeman's doing on the women's basketball side, what Sack and Jack are doing, what all the different offerings that we have. Whether you're a fair weather fan or you like the comedic aspect or you like the intense, in-depth basketball kind of critiquing, you're going to get it all with Gonzaga Nation SI.
I'll just close the podcast there at that note if you're cool with it.